The shattered crown. The silk of her ceremonial gown whispered against the marble floor as Seraphina approached the Alpha's chambers, her heart thundering with anticipation for tomorrow's mating ceremony. Moonlight streamed through the tall windows of the Silver Moon Pax Manor, casting ethereal patterns across the polished stone walls adorned with generations of Luna portraits, women who had ruled with grace, wisdom, and unwavering loyalty. Tomorrow, her own portrait would join their ranks. The scent hit her first. Her sister's jasmine perfume, sweet and cloying, mingled with something else entirely. The musky, intimate aroma of spent passion that made Seraphina's wolf recoil in confusion. Her hand froze on the ornate brass handle of Marcus's door, every instinct screaming warning she desperately wanted to ignore. No, not Marcus, not Elena. But the wooden door stood slightly ajar, and through the gap came sounds that shattered her world like glass against stone. A feminine gasp, a masculine groan of satisfaction, the rhythmic creaking of the massive oak bed where she had imagined herself lying tomorrow night as Marcus's mate, his Luna, his everything. Goddess Elena, Marcus's voice rumbled through the darkness, thick with satisfaction. You feel so much better than I ever imagined Seraphina would. Seraphina's knees nearly buckled. The ornate hallway seemed to tilt, the ancestral portraits blurring through tears that came swift and merciless. Her wolf howled within her chest, a sound of pure anguish that threatened to tear from her throat. She never deserved you. Elena's breathy reply came like a knife between Seraphina's ribs. The prophecy was always about her bloodline being cursed. The pack needs a Luna who can actually strengthen it, not weaken it with whatever darkness runs in our family. Cursed bloodline. The words echoed in Seraphina's mind as she pressed her back against the cold stone wall, fighting the urge to storm inside and confront them both. She had heard whispers, ancient mutterings from the eldest pack members about some long-forgotten prophecy, but Marcus had always dismissed such talk as superstitious nonsense. Apparently, he had been lying about that too. The door swung open wider, revealing Marcus's powerful silhouette as he moved to the window, moonlight highlighting every sculpted muscle of his naked form. Elena lay sprawled across the rumpled sheets, her dark hair, so like Seraphina's own, spread across the pillows like spilled ink. The council will approve the change, Marcus said with casual certainty that made Seraphina's blood freeze. I'll simply tell them the moon goddess revealed Elena as my true mate. They'll be relieved to avoid whatever curse Seraphina might have brought upon the pack. Seraphina stumbled backward, her bare feet silent on the marble as she fled down the corridor. The manor that had been her home for 23 years felt alien now, its shadows harboring secrets and betrayals she had never suspected. Her breathing came in sharp, painful bursts as she made her way to the great hall, where the pack council's voices drifted through the massive double doors. Ancient bloodline carries the mark of the old curse. Never should have approved the match. Elena would make a much more suitable Luna. The blood drained from Seraphina's face as realization crashed over her like ice water. This was not some spontaneous betrayal born of passion and poor judgment. This was orchestrated, planned, deliberate. Her own pack council, the men and women she had served faithfully for years, had conspired against her. She pushed through the doors with trembling hands. 6 pairs of eyes turned toward her, and not one showed surprise. Council Elder Mortis rose slowly, his weathered face grave with false sympathy. Seraphina, we were just discussing your situation. My situation? Her voice came out steadier than she felt, though her hands shook at her sides. The prophecy speaks clearly about your bloodline. Elder Cassandra spoke from the shadows, her words precise as surgical strikes. A Luna bearing the cursed mark will bring darkness upon her pack. We cannot risk it. I am Marcus's chosen mate, Seraphina said, even knowing how hollow the words sounded now. The moon goddess herself blessed our union. Mortis shook his grizzled head. Marcus has petitioned to change his selection. He claims the goddess revealed Elena as his true mate in a vision. The council finds his testimony compelling. The final pieces of Seraphina's life crumbled around her. She lifted her chin, drawing upon reserves of strength she hadn't known she possessed. And my title? Stripped, Cassandra said without a hint of remorse. You have until dawn to leave Silver Moon territory. The great hall fell silent except for the crackling of logs in the massive stone fireplace. Seraphina stood alone before the council that had helped raise her, surrounded by portraits of the strong women who had come before her, and felt something fundamental shift within her chest. Then I go, she said simply. Without another word, she turned and walked toward the doors that led to the forest beyond, leaving behind everything she had ever known, unaware that Marcus's child already grew within her womb, and that the cursed bloodline they so feared would soon awaken powers that could reshape their world. The king's recognition. The royal palace grounds stretched before Seraphina like something from a fever dream, all marble columns and crystalline fountains that caught the moonlight and threw it back in silver fragments. Ancient oak trees bordered the ceremonial courtyard, their gnarled branches creating cathedral archways overhead, while thousands of white roses climbed trellises that seemed to reach toward the star-drunk sky. The air hung thick with their perfume, so cloying it made her stomach turn, or perhaps that was just the bitter taste of her own ruined future coating her tongue. Torches flickered in golden sconces along the palace walls, their flames dancing like tiny spirits in the night breeze that carried the distant sound of celebration. She could hear music drifting from the main courtyard, the melodic strings and haunting flutes that always accompanied Luna ceremonies, and her chest tightened with a pain so sharp she nearly gasped aloud. Somewhere beyond those towering walls, hundreds of pack members were gathering to witness their Alpha King claim his political bride, to celebrate a union that would strengthen alliances and secure bloodlines, just like hers should have been. Seraphina pressed herself deeper into the shadows of a rose-covered gazebo, her bare feet silent on the cool grass. She shouldn't be here. Trespassing on royal lands was punishable by imprisonment, possibly death, but she couldn't bring herself to care. Her own ceremony lay in ruins behind her, her intended mate's rejection still echoing in her ears like a death knell, and she needed to see this, needed to witness what a real Luna ceremony looked like when the bride was actually wanted. The sound of approaching footsteps froze the blood in her veins. You're not supposed to be here. The voice was deep, commanding, with an undertone of curiosity rather than anger that surprised her. Seraphina spun around, her heart hammering against her ribs like a caged bird desperate for freedom. Through the dappled moonlight stepped a man who could only be Alpha King Darius himself, tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair that caught silver highlights in the torchlight and eyes the color of storm clouds before lightning strikes. He wore ceremonial robes of midnight blue silk that made his skin seem to glow, and when he moved, it was with the fluid grace of a predator who had never known defeat. Their eyes met. The world tilted off its axis. Something primal and ancient slammed into her chest with the force of a physical blow, stealing her breath and making her knees buckle. The mate bond, impossible, undeniable, electric, snapped into place between them like a golden thread pulled taut. She could feel his wolf calling to hers, could smell his scent of cedar and rain, and something indefinably wild that made her mouth water and her pulse spike. No. The word screamed through her mind, even as her body betrayed her, swaying toward him as if drawn by invisible strings. This can't be happening. Not now. Not with him. Darius had gone completely still, his nostrils flaring as he scented the air between them. His eyes, God, those eyes, darkened to the color of midnight, and she watched his pupils dilate as the truth hit him with the same devastating force. Impossible, he breathed, but his voice held wonder rather than denial. I have to go. The words tumbled from her lips in a panic, and she took a stumbling step backward. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have. I didn't mean to. Wait. He moved toward her, one hand extended as if she were a spooked deer. He was afraid of frightening away. What's your name? She shook her head frantically, tears burning her eyes as the cruel irony of the situation crashed over her in waves. Here was her true mate, the one the moon goddess had chosen for her, and he was completely, utterly beyond her reach. He was the Alpha King, about to be mated to some high-born lady who could offer him political advantages and pure bloodlines. She was nobody, worse than nobody. Your Majesty? A new voice called from the direction of the main courtyard, female and refined. The ceremony is about to begin. Lady Victoria is asking for you. Lady Victoria, his intended bride. The reminder shattered whatever spell had held them frozen in this moment of impossible recognition. Serafina turned to flee, but Darius moved with inhuman speed, catching her wrist in a gentle but unyielding grip. Please, he said, and the raw desperation in his voice made her chest ache. Don't run from me. She looked back at him, memorizing the sharp planes of his face, the way the moonlight caught in his dark hair, the warmth of his fingers around her wrist. You have a ceremony to attend, Your Majesty. His grip tightened. Not anymore. Before she could ask what he meant, he was striding toward the main courtyard, pulling her along beside him despite her protests. Whatever was about to happen, Serafina knew with bone-deep certainty that nothing would ever be the same. Dangerous desires. The royal palace sprawled before Serafina like a gilded cage, its ivory towers piercing the dawn sky with crystalline spires that caught the morning light and scattered it in rainbow fragments across manicured lawns. Ancient oak trees lined the cobblestone pathways, their massive trunks wrapped in climbing jasmine that released intoxicating waves of sweetness with each gentle breeze. The air itself seemed to shimmer with wealth and power. Rich earth from the sprawling gardens, the metallic tang of ornate fountains, and underneath it all, the wild musk that belonged uniquely to Alpha King Darius. Serafina pressed her palm against her still flat stomach, a protective gesture that had become second nature in the 3 days since arriving at the palace. The secret growing within her felt both precious and terrifying, a constant reminder of Marcus's betrayal and the reason she could never truly belong in this magnificent world. You're trembling. The deep voice made her spin around on the garden bench where she'd been hiding from the curious stares of palace staff. Darius emerged from behind a towering hedge of white roses, his powerful frame moving with the fluid grace that marked him as apex predator. Today he wore simple dark trousers and a white shirt open at the collar, but even dressed casually, authority radiated from every line of his body. Your Majesty. She started to rise, but his raised hand stopped her. Just Darius when we're alone. He settled beside her on the stone bench, careful to leave space between them, even as his pine and cedar scent wrapped around her like a warm embrace. You've been avoiding the dining hall. Heat crept up her neck. She had been surviving on fruit stolen from the kitchen and bread smuggled by sympathetic servants, terrified that her pregnancy would somehow show if she sat at the royal table. I'm not comfortable with formality. His laugh was rich and warm. Says the woman who curtsies every time she sees me, even when I've asked her not to. Despite herself, Serafina's lips curved upward. Old habits. The mate bond hummed between them, an electric current that made her skin tingle and her wolf whine with longing. She fought against it, building walls of ice around her heart. The last time she'd trusted these feelings, she'd ended up broken and pregnant, watching the man she'd loved pledge himself to another. Darius studied her profile with those devastating amber eyes that seemed to see straight through her defenses. Tell me about him. Who? But her voice cracked on the word. The one who hurt you so badly that you flinch every time I come near. Serafina's breath caught. She hadn't realized her fear was so transparent. There's nothing to tell. Sarah. The nickname fell from his lips like a caress, and she closed her eyes against the pull of it. I can sense your pain. It surrounds you like a shroud. You shouldn't. She started to stand again, but this time his hand caught her wrist, gentle but firm. Shouldn't what? Care about my mate's suffering? The word mate sent fire racing through her veins, even as panic clawed at her throat. I'm not your mate. I can't be. Because you're cursed? His thumb traced circles on her pulse point, and she was mortified by how her heartbeat stuttered at his touch. Or because you're carrying another man's child. The blood drained from her face so quickly she swayed. Darius caught her shoulders, steadying her as she stared at him in horror. How did you— I'm an alpha king, little wolf. Did you think I wouldn't recognize the changes in your scent? The protective way you hold yourself? His voice gentled. The question is why you're so afraid to tell me. Tears burned her eyes. Because it changes everything. Because no alpha wants another man's bastard. Especially not— Her voice broke. Especially not what? Especially not when she was abandoned at her own Luna ceremony like some unwanted scrap. The words tore from her throat, raw and bleeding. Darius's hands framed her face with devastating tenderness, thumbs brushing away tears she hadn't realized were falling. Look at me, Sarah. Reluctantly, she met his gaze and found no disgust, no rejection, only a fierce protectiveness that made her wolf purr even as her human heart trembled. I don't care whose child you carry, he said, each word deliberate and weighted with truth. That baby will be mine to protect, just as you are. Do you understand? Before she could respond, footsteps echoed on the garden path. They sprang apart as Royal Beta James appeared, his expression grim. Your Majesty, forgive the interruption, but Lady Victoria's father has arrived with the council. They're demanding an audience. Darius rose smoothly, authority settling around him like armor, but his eyes never left Seraphina's face. Tell them I'll be there momentarily. James bowed and retreated, leaving them alone with the weight of unfinished confessions hanging between them. This conversation isn't over, Darius promised, his voice carrying the unmistakable command of an alpha king. As he strode toward the palace, Seraphina touched her lips, still tingling from words unspoken, and wondered if she was brave enough to let herself hope. Shadows of the past. The palace corridors seemed to whisper secrets in the pre-dawn darkness, their marble floors gleaming like moonlit water beneath Seraphina's bare feet. She had taken to wandering these halls when sleep eluded her, which had become increasingly frequent since the ceremony 3 nights ago. The ancient stone walls, adorned with tapestries depicting centuries of werewolf history, felt both protective and suffocating. A golden cage that housed the most powerful pack in existence, yet somehow felt more dangerous than the wilderness she'd once called home. Something is wrong. The thought had been plaguing her for hours, a persistent itch beneath her skin that her wolf couldn't shake. The shadows seemed deeper tonight, pooling in corners where torchlight couldn't reach, and every footstep echoed with an ominous resonance that made her nerves sing with tension. A low growl rumbled from somewhere in the hidden passages behind the walls, passages she'd only recently learned existed. Seraphina pressed herself against the cold stone, her heart hammering against her ribs as she strained to listen. The sound came again, followed by hushed voices speaking in a dialect she didn't recognize, but somehow understood in her bones. The cursed one walks alone, hissed a voice like grinding stone. Tonight, we end the prophecy. Terror shot through her veins like liquid fire. Shadow wolves. The ancient enemies her grandmother had whispered about in cautionary tales, the ones who hunted those blessed, or cursed, with prophetic blood. She had hoped they were merely stories told to frighten children into obedience. The wall beside her began to shift, stone grinding against stone with barely perceptible movement. A hidden door was opening, and she could smell them now. Wild musk tinged with something darker, older, hungrier than any werewolf scent she'd encountered. Without thinking, she turned to run, but her foot caught in the hem of her nightgown, sending her sprawling across the marble floor. Pain lanced through her abdomen, sharp and unexpected, doubling her over as nausea rolled through her stomach. No, not now, she thought desperately, even as understanding dawned with crystal clarity, the morning sickness, the exhaustion, the heightened sensitivity to sense. She was carrying Darius's child. Seraphina! Darius's voice boomed through the corridor, raw with panic and fury. She looked up to see him racing toward her, his eyes blazing gold in the torchlight, already partially shifted. Behind him ran Marcus, her former pack leader, but something in his expression made her blood turn to ice. Marcus? She gasped, struggling to her knees as the shadow wolves emerged from the wall like living nightmares. What are you? I'm sorry, Sarah, Marcus said, though his voice held no remorse. But you were never meant for this. The prophecy speaks of destruction, and I won't let you bring ruin to our kind. The betrayal cut deeper than any physical wound. This man had raised her, protected her, been like a father to her, and now he stood with creatures that wanted her dead. Lady Victoria emerged from another hidden passage, her elegant features twisted with satisfaction and ancient hatred. The cursed bloodline ends tonight, Victoria declared, her voice ringing with authority. Too long have we allowed prophecy to dictate our fate. The shadow wolves moved with inhuman speed, their forms shifting between wolf and something far more sinister. Seraphina tried to rise, but another wave of pain crashed through her abdomen, stealing her breath and leaving her vulnerable on the cold marble floor. The baby, she thought in terror. I'm losing the baby. Darius reached her just as the first assassin lunged, his massive frame intercepting claws meant for her throat. His roar of rage shook the very foundations of the palace, a sound that spoke of primal fury and protective instinct older than civilization itself. She watched him fight with desperate grace, every movement calculated to keep the attackers away from her prone form. The child, she whispered, pressing her hands to her stomach as warmth, blood, seeped through her nightgown. Darius, the baby. His golden eyes snapped to hers, and in that instant, she saw his world reshape itself around this new knowledge. The fierce protectiveness in his expression intensified to something almost feral, and when he turned back to face their enemies, he was no longer just defending his mate, he was defending his heir. You dare threaten my family? The words emerged as more growl than speech, and the temperature in the corridor seemed to drop several degrees. Marcus stepped forward, silver blade gleaming in his grip. She'll destroy us all, Darius. The prophecy, Darius snarled, speaks of transformation, not destruction. And anyone who threatens my mate and child will learn the difference. As Seraphina felt consciousness slipping away, the last thing she saw was her king, her alpha, her mate, standing over her like an avenging angel, ready to face down the shadows of the past to protect their future. Souls unveiled. The recovery chambers embraced, Seraphina like a velvet cocoon, their warmth seeping into her bones as she lay propped against silk pillows the color of midnight. Flames danced in the massive stone hearth, casting golden shadows that rippled across tapestries depicting ancient wolves beneath star-scattered skies. The scent of burning cedar mingled with jasmine oil from the brass braziers positioned throughout the room, creating an atmosphere both soothing and sacred. Moonlight streamed through tall arched windows, painting silver paths across the polished marble floor, while the soft whisper of wind through the curtains provided a gentle lullaby. Darius sat beside her bed, his powerful frame folded into a chair that seemed too delicate for his presence. The firelight played across the sharp angles of his face, highlighting the exhaustion that shadowed his golden eyes. He'd barely left her side since the royal healer had pronounced her stable, his hand never straying far from hers. "Tell me about the prophecy," he said quietly, his voice rough with emotion. Seraphina's fingers traced the intricate embroidery on her blanket, buying herself time. The words had been locked inside her heart for so long, wrapped in layers of shame and fear. "The oracle spoke it on my 16th birthday," she whispered. "She said I would bring destruction to any pack that claimed me as Luna, that my bloodline carried a curse dating back to the first wolves." The admission hung between them like a blade. Darius leaned forward, his hand covering hers, calloused fingers surprisingly gentle. "What else?" "That I would bear a child who would either unite the kingdoms or destroy them all." Her voice cracked. "My own pack exiled me the next day, said I was too dangerous to remain." Darius was silent for a long moment, his thumb stroking across her knuckles. When he finally spoke, his words carried the weight of absolute conviction. "Prophecies are riddles, beloved. Perhaps destruction means the end of old hatreds. Perhaps your curse is actually a gift." The endearment sent warmth flooding through her chest. No one had ever called her beloved with such reverence, as if the word itself was a prayer. She studied his profile, memorizing the strong line of his jaw, the way his dark hair fell across his forehead. "Why aren't you afraid?" she asked. He turned to meet her gaze, and she saw centuries of loneliness reflected in those golden depths. "Because I've been empty for so long that even destruction would be preferable to this hollow existence." His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "Do you know what it's like to rule over thousands and still feel utterly alone?" Her heart clenched at the raw pain in his admission. This powerful Alpha King, feared and respected throughout the realm, was just as broken as she was. "Every night I stood on my balcony, wondering if I would ever find my mate, wondering if the moon goddess had forgotten me entirely." He lifted their joined hands, pressing her palm against his, chest where his heart thundered beneath her touch. "Then I caught your scent, and everything changed. In that instant, I knew I would burn down kingdoms to keep you safe." "Darius." His name escaped her lips like a prayer. "I love you, Seraphina." The words fell between them with devastating simplicity. "I loved you before I knew your face, before I learned your name. My soul recognized yours." Tears blurred her vision as every defense she'd carefully constructed began to crumble. "I'm terrified," she confessed. "What if the prophecy is right? What if our child will be magnificent?" He rose from his chair, settling carefully on the edge of her bed. "Whatever comes, we'll face it together. You're not alone anymore." She reached up to cup his face, marveling at the way he leaned into her touch, like a man starved for affection. "I can feel it," she whispered. "Our bond. It's like golden thread weaving through my chest." "The mate bond is strongest during pregnancy," he murmured, turning to press a kiss to her palm. "Our child is already connecting us in ways we don't fully understand." The thought should have frightened her, but instead it filled her with wonder. "What will this mean for your kingdom? For mine?" "It means everything changes." His smile was soft, transformative. "Old alliances will shift, new ones will form. There will be those who oppose us, who fear the power our union represents." She pulled him down until his forehead rested against hers, breathing in his scent of pine and winter storms. "And if they're right to fear us? Then we'll teach them that love is stronger than fear, that unity is more powerful than division." His lips brushed against hers, feather light and reverent. "We'll rewrite the prophecies, beloved, together." Outside, clouds drifted across the moon, casting shifting patterns of light and shadow through their sanctuary. Seraphina closed her eyes, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat sync with hers, their child a warm presence between them. For the first time in her life, she wasn't running from destiny. She was embracing it. The King's Dilemma. The marble floors of the palace corridors stretched endlessly before Seraphina as she wandered through the moonlit halls, her bare feet silent against the cold stone. Sleep had eluded her completely, her mind churning with the weight of tomorrow's ceremony, the mating ritual that would bind her to Darius forever. The ornate tapestries depicting ancient wolf battles seemed to watch her with knowing eyes, their golden threads catching the pale light that filtered through the towering windows. Crystal chandeliers hung like frozen waterfalls above her head, their faceted surfaces casting dancing shadows across the burgundy walls lined with portraits of long-dead Alpha Kings. A sharp voice cut through the silence ahead, emanating from the council chambers, where warm golden light spilled beneath the massive oak doors. Seraphina's wolf stirred uneasily within her as she recognized the authoritative tone of Councillor Aldrich, the eldest member of the Royal Council. "This madness must end, Your Majesty." Aldrich's voice carried clearly through the thick doors. "You cannot mate with the Cursed One. The packs are already restless, whispers of rebellion spreading like wildfire through the territories." Seraphina's heart lurched, her feet carrying her closer, despite every instinct screaming at her to flee. She pressed herself against the cool stone wall beside the entrance, her pulse thundering in her ears. "She is my mate." Darius's voice was low, dangerous, but Seraphina could hear the strain beneath his controlled tone. "The moon goddess herself chose her for me." "The moon goddess chose poorly," another counselor spat, his words like poisoned arrows finding their mark in Seraphina's chest. "No Alpha King has ever taken a cursed wolf as his Luna. It goes against everything our kind holds sacred." Seraphina's legs nearly buckled as Councillor Aldrich continued. "The northern packs have already threatened to withdraw their allegiance. The eastern territories speak of naming their own Alpha King. You're looking at civil war, Darius. Is one woman worth the destruction of everything your ancestors built?" The silence that followed stretched like a taut wire, and Seraphina found herself holding her breath, waiting for Darius to defend her, to choose her over their threats. But the pause grew longer, heavier, until it crushed something vital within her chest. "I need time to consider," Darius finally said, and those 5 words shattered Seraphina's world into 1,000 glittering pieces. She stumbled backward, her hand pressed to her mouth to stifle the sob that threatened to escape. "He's considering it." The thought carved through her like a silver blade, leaving her hollow and bleeding from the inside. "He's actually considering abandoning me to save his precious crown." But even as anger flared within her, a deeper truth emerged from the ashes of her broken heart. She loved him. Goddess help her, she loved him more than her own life. And if her presence threatened everything he'd worked for, everything his people needed, then there was only one choice to make. Seraphina fled through the corridors like a ghost, her feet carrying her to her chambers where she hastily gathered a few belongings. Her hands shook as she changed into traveling clothes, her wolf whimpering in distress at what they were about to do. But this was love, wasn't it? True love meant sacrifice, meant putting the needs of the beloved above your own desperate desires. The mountain road stretched before her like a ribbon of silver in the moonlight, pine trees towering on either side like silent sentinels. The air was thin and sharp, carrying the scent of snow and something wilder, more primal. Her breath came in white puffs as she walked, each step taking her further from Darius, further from the only happiness she'd ever known. She had been walking for hours when they found her. The shadow wolves emerged from the darkness between the trees like living nightmares, their black fur seeming to absorb the moonlight itself. Their eyes glowed amber in the darkness as they circled her, and Seraphina's exhausted wolf barely stirred in response to the threat. "Well, well," a deep voice rumbled as the largest of the wolves shifted into human form. He was tall and lean, with silver-streaked black hair and scars that told stories of countless battles. The cursed princess, running away from her fairy tale. "Magnus," Seraphina breathed, recognizing the legendary leader of the Shadow Wolves from whispered stories told around pack fires. He was supposed to be a myth, A monster parents used to frighten misbehaving pups. You know me. His smile was sharp as a blade. But do you know yourself, little cursed one? Do you know what blood truly runs in your veins? Before Seraphina could respond, darkness claimed her as one of his packmates struck her from behind. Her last conscious thought was of Darius, and whether he would even notice she was gone. When she woke, ancient stone walls surrounded her, and the truth of her heritage awaited in the shadows. The King's War. The scent of rain and pine couldn't mask the metallic tang of betrayal that clung to every surface of the palace war room. Darius stood before the massive oak table, his hands planted firmly on its scarred surface, studying the detailed maps spread beneath the flickering candlelight. The ancient stone walls seemed to pulse with his barely contained rage, shadows dancing across battle plans and territorial markings like ghosts of wars past. Heavy tapestries depicting legendary werewolf victories hung motionless in the stifling air, their golden threads dulled by the weight of impending conflict. His wolf paced restlessly beneath his skin, a caged beast demanding blood for the theft of their mate. Every fiber of his being screamed to shift, to hunt, to tear apart anyone who had dared touch what was his. The revelation of Seraphina's sacrifice had hit him like a physical blow. His Luna, carrying his heir, traded away like a political pawn while he'd been drowning in council meetings and ceremonial duties. My king. Beta James entered with swift, purposeful strides, his usually composed demeanor cracked with urgency. Behind him followed a group of wolves Darius hadn't expected to see, former Silver Moon pack members, their heads bowed in supplication but their eyes burning with determination. Speak, Darius commanded, his voice carrying the dangerous edge of an alpha pushed beyond his limits. An older woman stepped forward, her silver-streaked hair catching the candlelight. Alpha King, I am Elena, former elder of Silver Moon Pack. We come bearing truth about the prophecy, truth that Alpha Marcus twisted for his own ends. Darius's golden eyes fixed on her with laser intensity. Continue. Elena's weathered hands trembled as she spoke. The prophecy doesn't speak of sacrifice to prevent war. It speaks of a Luna who will unite the packs through love, not division through blood. Marcus perverted the ancient words, used our fear to justify giving away our rightful Luna. Her voice broke with shame. We were blind, my king, but now we see the truth. Seraphina was never meant to be sacrificed. She was meant to stand beside you and heal our fractured world. The room fell silent except for the distant rumble of thunder. Darius straightened slowly, his massive frame radiating lethal intent. When he spoke, his words carried the weight of absolute authority. James, send word to every loyal pack within 100 miles. They have 2 hours to arm themselves and meet us at the northern border. His fingers traced the mountain paths leading to Shadow Wolf territory, memorizing every treacherous curve and hidden ravine. If they refuse, they'll answer to me personally when this is over. Sir, the Shadow Wolves have fortified their stronghold. It's nearly impregnable, built into the mountain itself with only one known entrance. James's tactical mind was already calculating odds and obstacles. Darius's lips pulled back in a feral smile that held no warmth. Then we'll make our own entrance. He turned to the former Silver Moon wolves, seeing the guilt and desperate hope warring in their expressions. You want redemption for your pack's betrayal? You'll have it. But understand this. I'm not going to negotiate or play political games. I'm going to war, and anyone who stands between me and my mate will die. Elena nodded grimly. We know the Shadow Wolf territory better than anyone. There's an old hunting trail, barely passable, that leads to a weakness in their northern wall. It's dangerous. One wrong step and you'll fall into a ravine that has no bottom. Perfect. Darius rolled up the maps with swift, efficient movements. Danger is exactly what they won't expect. As the room emptied to prepare for battle, James lingered. Darius, you know this could start the very war the prophecy supposedly warned against. Darius paused at the doorway, his profile sharp as granite in the candlelight. Let them come. Let every pack that thinks they can use my mate as a bargaining chip face my wrath. Seraphina is carrying my heir, our future, and I'll burn this entire world to ash before I let them harm her. The storm outside intensified as Darius strode through the palace corridors, servants and guards scrambling to get out of his path. His wolf's need for vengeance merged seamlessly with his human love for Seraphina, creating a force of nature that would not be denied. Within an hour, the courtyard filled with armed wolves, some loyal pack members, others former Silver Moon wolves seeking redemption, all united under their Alpha King's terrible purpose. The rain had turned to a driving sleet that seemed to mirror Darius's cold fury. He mounted his warhorse, a massive black stallion that snorted and pawed the ground as if sensing the violence to come. Looking out over his assembled forces, Darius felt something settle deep in his chest, not peace, but absolute certainty. Tonight we bring our Luna home, he roared over the storm. And anyone who tries to stop us learns why I am king. Thunder crashed overhead as they rode into the darkness, racing against time toward the mountains where his heart waited in chains. The Luna's power. The ancient ritual chamber reeked of damp stone and centuries-old blood, its walls carved with symbols that seemed to writhe and pulse in the flickering torchlight. Seraphina's wrists burned where the mystical chains bound her to the obsidian altar, their surface etched with runes that glowed sickly green against her skin. The air hung thick with incense, and something darker, a metallic tang that spoke of sacrifice and forbidden magic. Above her, the vaulted ceiling disappeared into shadows so deep they seemed alive, breathing with malevolent purpose. Pain lanced through her swollen belly as another contraction seized her body. Too early, much too early. The dark magic Magnus had unleashed was forcing her into labor weeks before her time, and she could feel her unborn child's distress like a second heartbeat synchronized with her own terror. The ancient bloodlines always fought the hardest. Magnus circled the altar with predatory grace, his silver eyes reflecting the torchlight like mirrors. But they also break the most beautifully. Seraphina gritted her teeth against another wave of agony, refusing to give him the satisfaction of her screams. The Shadow Wolf leader's face was a mask of cruel anticipation as he prepared his ritual tools, a curved blade that seemed to drink the light around it, vials of viscous liquid that moved with their own dark purpose. My child, she thought desperately, pressing her consciousness inward toward the life growing within her. I won't let him hurt you. I swear it. The moment her maternal instincts flared to their fullest intensity, something deep within her bloodline stirred. It started as warmth in her chest, spreading through her limbs like liquid starlight. The mystical chains began to vibrate, their green glow flickering as if fighting against some greater power. Magnus paused mid-step, his nostrils flaring. What? The ancient symbols carved into the chamber walls started to shift, rearranging themselves into patterns that predated even the Shadow Wolf's dark magic. Seraphina gasped as knowledge flooded her mind. Memories that weren't her own, stretching back through generations of women who had carried this same power in their veins. She wasn't cursed. She had never been cursed. The realization hit her like lightning splitting the night sky. Her bloodline traced back to Celine's first chosen, the original Luna, who had united the fractured werewolf clans under the moon goddess's blessing. Every painful moon cycle, every rejection from her, birth pack, every moment of feeling broken and wrong. It had all been preparation for this moment. You're afraid, Seraphina whispered, seeing the truth reflected in Magnus's suddenly wary expression. You've always been afraid of what I might become. The chains cracked, not broken, but damaged enough that silver light began seeping through the fractures. Magnus snarled, lunging forward with the ritual blade raised high. I'll cut the power from your womb before it fully awakens. But as the weapon descended toward her belly, the chamber exploded with moonlight. A figure materialized between Seraphina and her attacker, tall, ethereal, with silver hair that moved like liquid mercury and eyes that held the depth of eternity. The moon goddess herself, or perhaps her spirit given form by Seraphina's awakening power. My daughter, the apparition spoke with a voice like wind through ancient trees. You were never meant to kneel. Magnus stumbled backward, his blade clattering to the stone floor as the divine presence filled every corner of the chamber. The mystical chains binding Seraphina dissolved like morning mist, and she felt her true strength flooding back into her limbs. She sat up slowly, one protective hand cradling her belly, while power coursed through her veins like molten silver. Her child had stopped struggling, as if sensing that the danger was passing. Around them, the very stones of the chamber began to sing, a harmonious note that spoke of unity, of pack bonds that transcended individual ambition. This is impossible, Magnus breathed, pressing himself against the far wall as Seraphina rose to her feet. The bloodline was broken. We made sure. You made sure of nothing. Seraphina's voice carried new authority, resonating with the power of every Luna who had come before her. You cannot break what was forged by divine will. The ghostly figure of the moon goddess smiled, her form already beginning to fade. Remember, my child, your strength was never in fighting alone. It was in bringing others home to themselves. As the vision dissolved, Seraphina understood. Magnus and his shadow wolves weren't her enemies to destroy. They were lost pack members to reclaim. The power flowing through her wasn't meant for vengeance, but for healing the ancient rifts that had torn the werewolf world apart. She looked at Magnus, cowering against the wall, and felt not hatred, but profound sadness for how far he had fallen from his true nature. I forgive you, she said simply. The words hit him like a physical blow, and for just a moment, she glimpsed the broken wolf beneath all that darkness. Someone who had been hurt so deeply that causing pain seemed like the only way to make it stop. The chamber began to crumble around them as her awakened power destabilized Magnus's dark magic, but Seraphina felt no fear. She was exactly who she was meant to be. Finally, united in battle. The Shadow Wolf fortress trembled beneath Seraphina's feet as ancient stones cracked and mortar crumbled like brittle bones. Moonlight poured through the gaping wounds in the ceiling, silver beams cutting through the suffocating darkness that had shrouded this cursed place for centuries. The air tasted of copper and ozone, electric with the power that surged through her veins like liquid starlight. Every breath she drew seemed to pull energy from the very cosmos itself, her newly awakened abilities crackling beneath her skin in waves of pure, untamed force. This is what I was meant to become, she realized, cradling her newborn daughter against her chest. The infant's eyes, impossibly bright, like captured moonbeams, gazed up at her with ancient wisdom that shouldn't have existed in one so young. Around them, the fortress walls groaned and shifted, unable to contain the magnitude of power flowing between mother and child. The sound of battle echoed from the courtyard beyond, snarls, howls, and the clash of supernatural forces meeting in violent collision. Darius. Even separated by stone and distance, she could feel him through their mate bond, his desperate fury as he fought to reach them. The connection between them had transformed into something transcendent, no longer just emotional but metaphysical, their very souls intertwined across space and time. You cannot escape your destiny, Luna Queen, Magnus snarled from the shadows, his form writhing between wolf and something far more sinister. The curse had twisted him beyond recognition, his eyes now pools of absolute darkness that seemed to devour light itself. The ancient prophecy speaks of division, not unity. Your daughter will bring about the end of... No! Seraphina's voice rang with newfound authority, power resonating through every syllable. The baby in her arms began to glow with soft, pearl-white radiance that made the shadows recoil. You've corrupted the prophecy's meaning for your own twisted purposes. She isn't here to divide. She's here to heal. The fortress shuddered violently as an explosion of golden light erupted from the courtyard. Through their bond, Seraphina felt Darius's triumph as his alpha power reached unprecedented heights, fed by their connection and his desperate love for his family. Walls that had stood for a millennium began to crumble, revealing the star-drunk sky above where the full moon hung like a beacon of hope. Then he was there, bursting through the collapsing doorway with his eyes blazing amber fire and his massive wolf form radiating raw dominance. The sight of him, fierce, protective, utterly magnificent, sent such a surge of love and relief through her that her own power flared in response. Where their energies met and mingled, the very air seemed to sing. Together, she thought, and felt his answering roar of agreement echo through their bond. Magnus lunged with supernatural speed, claws extended and fangs dripping shadow. But instead of meeting him separately, Seraphina and Darius moved as one entity, their combined power creating a barrier of pure moonlight that sent the corrupted Alpha flying backward into the crumbling stone. Their daughter's cry, not of fear, but of power, joined their harmony, and suddenly the entire fortress was awash in radiance so brilliant it seemed to burn away centuries of accumulated darkness. "The curse!" Darius gasped, his form shifting back to human as he reached for them. "I can feel it breaking." And it was. Like chains snapping one by one, the ancient magic that had kept the packs divided and fighting began to dissolve under the combined force of their trinity. Seraphina watched in wonder as the shadows fled from every corner, as the twisted stone began to heal itself, as the very air grew sweet and clean for the first time in generations. Magnus's scream of rage and defeat echoed through the transforming fortress, but his voice was already fading, the curse's power over him dissolving like mist before the dawn. "This cannot be." "It can," came a voice like silver bells and wind through ancient trees. "And it is." They turned as one to see her, the moon goddess herself, manifesting in forms so beautiful it made their hearts ache. Her presence filled the healing space with peace and benediction, her smile radiant as she gazed upon their daughter. "The bridge between worlds," she whispered, extending one luminous finger to touch the baby's forehead. Where she touched, a mark appeared, not a scar or brand, but a symbol of pure light that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Through her, all wolves shall find their way home to unity. The fortress, no longer a place of shadow and imprisonment, transformed around them into a temple of moonlight and hope. Through the windows, they could see the defeated shadow wolves below beginning to shift back to their true forms, the curse's hold finally broken. Beyond them, pack after pack approached, not as enemies, but as family long separated, finally ready to rejoin under the blessed leadership of their Luna Queen and Alpha King. Seraphina felt Darius's arms encircle them both, his love and wonder flowing through their bond like warm honey. Their daughter gurgled softly, her impossible eyes reflecting not just their faces, but the bright future spreading before them all like moonlit wings. The war was over. Unity had begun. The new dawn. The full moon hung like a silver crown above the royal palace ceremonial grounds, casting ethereal light across the marble columns adorned with cascading white roses and moonflowers that bloomed only under lunar blessing. Thousands of candles flickered in crystal holders, their warm glow dancing across the faces of werewolves from every territory who had gathered to witness something unprecedented. A true mating ceremony between equals, between destined souls who had found each other against all odds. Seraphina stood at the edge of the ceremonial circle, her heart thrumming with a contentment so deep it felt like coming home after a lifetime of wandering. The silk of her ceremonial gown whispered against her skin, the fabric a shimmering ivory that seemed to capture moonlight itself. Ancient symbols of power and protection were embroidered in silver thread along the bodice, symbols her grandmother had once traced on her palm while telling her stories of legendary Luna queens who ruled with both strength and compassion. 6 months ago, I thought my life was ending, she reflected, watching as pack leaders from territories that had been enemies for generations stood side by side, their faces peaceful under the moon's gentle radiance. The air was thick with the scent of night-blooming jasmine and the pine smoke from ceremonial torches that lined the sacred ground. I never imagined it was just beginning. Mama! The soft voice drew her attention downward to where Luna toddled toward her on unsteady legs, her silver hair catching the moonlight like spun starlight. At barely 8 months old, their daughter already showed signs of her prophesied nature. Her eyes held ancient wisdom, and small animals were drawn to her with an otherworldly pull. "There's my little moon princess," Seraphina whispered, scooping Luna into her arms and pressing a gentle kiss to her forehead. The child's presence immediately calmed the last of her pre-ceremony nerves, reminding her of everything she and Darius had built together. "She's beautiful, just like her mother." Seraphina turned at the familiar voice, her breath catching as it always did when she saw Darius. He stood resplendent in ceremonial robes of deep midnight blue, silver threading creating constellation patterns across the rich fabric. His dark hair was pulled back with a circlet bearing the royal seal, but his eyes, those warm golden eyes that had seen her worth when no one else could, held only love as they gazed at his family. "Are you ready for this, my Luna?" he asked, moving closer until she could feel the warmth radiating from his skin, could catch his scent of cedar and rain that had become synonymous with home and safety. "I've been ready since the night you chose me over politics," she replied, reaching up to touch his cheek. "Since you saw me as a blessing instead of a curse." The ceremonial drums began their ancient rhythm, echoing across the grounds like a heartbeat. Elder Matthias, now fully recovered and serving as their high priest, raised his arms to gather the crowd's attention. Representatives from every pack territory stood in concentric circles around the sacred altar. Wolves who had once viewed Seraphina with suspicion now looked upon her with reverence and hope. "My people," Darius's voice carried across the ceremonial grounds as he addressed the gathered werewolves, Luna content in Seraphina's arms between them. "Tonight, we celebrate not just the mating bond between your Alpha King and Luna Queen, but the dawn of a new era. An era where love conquers politics, where unity replaces division, and where the prophesied heir will guide us all toward lasting peace." A roar of approval rose from the crowd, voices lifted in celebration under the star-scattered sky. Seraphina felt tears of joy prick her eyes as she recognized faces in the crowd. Wolves who had once turned their backs on her now cheered her name with genuine affection and respect. "Luna Seraphina," Elder Matthias called, his weathered voice carrying the weight of tradition and ceremony. "Do you accept your destined role as mother to the prophesied child, as queen to all werewolf territories, and as true mate to Alpha King Darius?" "I do," she replied, her voice strong and clear, carrying across the grounds. "I accept my destiny, my responsibility, and my greatest joy." The moon seemed to pulse brighter as ancient magic swirled around them, and Luna giggled, reaching tiny hands toward the silver light as if she could catch it. The sight made Seraphina's heart overflow with love and wonder. "This is what I was meant for," she realized as Darius took her free hand in his, their fingers intertwining while their daughter babbled happily between them. "Not the rejected mate ceremony that broke my heart, but this perfect moment where everything finally makes sense." As the ceremonial words were spoken and their bond blessed before all the territories, Seraphina looked up at the moon that had witnessed her tears of rejection and now shone down on her moment of ultimate triumph. She had never been cursed. She had always been destined for something far greater than she could have imagined. The celebration that followed would last until dawn, but Seraphina had already found her greatest treasure in the love that surrounded her, complete and unshakable at last.